Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. Today I'm going to be counting down my top 10 Stephen King novels, and this is based on my reading of 40 of his novels so far. Please take note that there will be no short story collections and no novellas in this video. Please stay tuned. Okay everyone, Stephen King is my favourite author, and I got to thinking about why I love this author so much and continue to read his works all the way from the 70s all the way to the present day, and what sets him apart from other authors. And I came down to something that might be a little bit simplistic, but for me it's really about how good he is at creating characters. He takes his time and he knows normal people, everyday people. He has his finger on the pulse of society. He knows the vulnerabilities, the fears, the insecurities that lie within us all. And he can bring those out in the novel. And by doing so, he creates three-dimensional characters that you care for. And a lot of those characters end up violent and evil. But a lot of them as well find strength and courage and love. And this is something that he is superb at. And it makes you live and breathe these characters. He then puts these characters in extraordinary situations, horrific situations, sometimes supernatural, but sometimes just grounded in reality. And then you're left with these characters that have to figure things out for themselves and often fight this evil and band together. And this is so common in so many of his novels. And I think, there are many more reasons why I enjoy him. But because of these things, he just tells a good story that you can relate to. Because you relate to the characters. There's something of themselves in you. And I think that is something powerful in his writing and why he has such a broad fan base. Now I am going to give some special mentions. Very, very briefly, I'm just going to rattle them off. Because having read 40 of his novels, it was kind of hard, having enjoyed so many of them. In fact, it's just a handful that I didn't care so much for. It was very, very hard to narrow them down. And I also want to say that the Dark Tower series is one of my favourite series of all time. And I've decided to just include one of my favourite Dark Tower series novel into my top 10. Because otherwise there'd be 3 or 4 in there, and that's just, that won't work for me. So without further ado, let's just do some special mentions. First of all, we have The Green Mile, where a man is wrongly accused of murdering 2 young girls and he ends up on death row. This book is powerful, it's moving, it's tragic, and it's very, very sad. Second of all, we have Joyland, which I read this year and absolutely loved. It's a warm coming of age story. I've spoken about it already on my channel. Not so much a horror novel, but a very moving murder mystery coming of age novel set in a fun fair. Thirdly, we have Misery. Very dark, very scary, terrifying. Really just with these 2 characters, and it is a horrifying novel. But to be honest, I really preferred the movie with Kathy Bates in it. And finally we have Cujo. Now this book is deeply disturbing, ultimately very tragic. I love seeing the whole story from Cujo's point of view. But yeah, the ending is very sad. It's a very uncomfortable read. Could have been in my top 10 possibly if I reread it. But it's not. Cujo. Okay everyone, now we come to my list. In 10th position we have the criminally underrated Needful Things. I know a lot of people dislike this book. I know that when it came out it was absolutely panned by the critics, but I think it is just such a fun, violent, crazy ride. It's about a man, a stranger, who comes to a small town, Castle Rock. That comes up in a number of King novels, Castle Rock and Maine. In fact, that's a topic for another conversation where we talk about how so many things are linked in the Stephen King multiverse. But we're not going to go there now, otherwise this video will be, 40-50 minutes. We don't want to do that. Dudes. Right. So we got Leland Gaunt, and he's a stranger in town, and he opens up an antique store called Needful Things. Now, when you walk into the store as one of the townspeople, you happen across something that your heart has yearned for all your life, your deepest, darkest desire. And he gives it to you. And it's a gracious man. He gives it to you at a minimal material cost, whatever you can afford. However, there's a catch involved. He wants you to perform a little prank on someone that you do not know in the town. Just a harmless little prank. Now, what I love about this book is just the way things spiral out of control and people turn on each other. Remember, I said that he's an expert with characters. He's an expert at knowing what makes us tick as people. And in the small town, there's resentment boiling beneath the surface for these people. And he basically taps into that. And I can see that actually had a lot of fun writing his novel. There's a lot of dark humor, but first 2/3 of the novel are kind of slow. You learn about the characters, you learn about the town, and there's a build-up, and there's a tension. And then in the last 1/3, things just go off. And it is bloody, it is gory, at times it is kind of ridiculous, but then Stephen King does get a bit ridiculous sometimes, but it's a hell of a lot of fun. And that's why it's placed in 10th position. That is Needful Things. Okay everyone, in 9th position we have another underrated Stephen King novel that he co-wrote with his friend. And this is actually the first of a 2-part series, and that is The Talisman. And he wrote this with Peter Straub, the author of Ghost Story. Now, I think a lot of people have a problem with this because of the fact that there are 2 voices. And I don't know, this feels like it isn't totally a Stephen King novel. And in some ways it isn't. That it is written with 2 different voices, I didn't have any problem with that. I think this is a magical adventure, a fantasy. It's not so much a horror, although it has a lot of dark elements. And it's about a boy, Jack Sawyer, who travels across America in order to find the talisman, which is going to heal his mother, who is dying of cancer. Now, in an alternative world, at the territories, there is a queen, the twinner of his mother, who is also dying. So by getting hold of this artifact, or this thing called the talisman, he's going to be saving both his mother and the queen. Obviously there are enemies along the way. And he also meets some great friends that help him on his journey. And he has this ability to be able to go from the real world, when he crosses America, into the territories, which he needs to do often to escape danger. And it is just a magical adventure, filled with some really dark situations that he has to get through. And I loved it. And I would recommend anyone who hasn't given it a try to pick up The Talisman. In 8th position we have one of Stephen King's newer novels. Not brand new, but definitely in the 2000s, I think. And this is also divided opinion, but I thought it was absolutely excellent. And I've actually read it twice. And that is Stephen King, The Institute. Now, the story is sort of in 2 parts, which I think turns some people off. Because on the one hand, you get this character who is Tim Jamison, who's actually quite a likable guy, almost quite heroic, but he's an ex-cop who's done something wrong. And you find him in the middle of nowhere, in this kind of nowhere little town next to these train tracks. And you think to yourself, okay, he's obviously an important character, but then he disappears for I don't know how many pages, and he's just left there. But Stephen King has a purpose for him being there, and he needs to be there. Because then we switch to a boy who is Luke Ellis, a highly intelligent boy, very, very high IQ, who also has psychokinetic ability that he can't control. And one day he is snatched from his mother and father, who are brutally murdered, exterminated, executed, and he's taken to this institute, which is this place where a group of other children that are similar to him, they all have this ability, sort of telekinesis or something, and they are experimented on. There's cruelty, they're tested daily, and it's a very harsh environment. And what terrified me about this novel, so it's not so much a horror, it's more like a thriller, a suspense thriller. But what really terrified me about this novel is that in this institute they have this front side and this back half, front half and back half. And the kids that go to the back half aren't seen again. And just as you learn more about this place and when you take a visit to other parts of this institute, there is some truly horrific imagery that was burnt into my mind. And that really puts this way up on my list. I also enjoyed the whole action thing that happens at the end. I'm not going to give any spoilers away. Just all in all, this was just a really thrilling, exciting read. And as I say, I read it twice, pretty much in one sitting, 2 sittings, and it is what? Over 400, close to 500 pages. That is The Institute. Okay, in 7th position we have Pet Sematary. Unfortunately, I no longer have a copy of this novel. I really think this is probably Stephen King's darkest, most dangerous work. It deals with love, loss, grief, death. And it deals with Louis Creed and his family who move away from the city into a small town. Almost guaranteed that this town is in Maine somewhere. And immediately when they get to this house, they are surrounded by death. In front of their house is a busy highway, and these trucks drive past way too quickly, and they have a cat and 2 young children. Behind the house, they are warned. There's a pet cemetery where the kids in town bury their pets. But their neighbour, an awesome old man, I can't remember what his name is, but he warns them not to go behind the pet cemetery, because behind the cemetery is an ancient Indian burial ground. And basically, I'm not going to give any spoilers away because this is the sort of book you need to go in without knowing anything. All I will say is that this is a devastating novel, and if you are a parent, look, I read this when I was a teenager. I'm not a parent, but I think I need to read it again now to actually really appreciate some of the themes that are so dark in this novel. And I would really recommend picking it up. It might change you, it might change the way you look at life. And it's also interesting that in many of these novels there's a huge cast of characters. This novel is a lot more focused, and it's more focused on Louis, this man, and how he changes through the novel. Yeah, that's all I really want to talk about Pet Sematary. I don't want to give away any spoilers. You need to pick it up and give it a go. In 6th position we have the best of modern day Stephen King. Absolutely wonderful, 11/22/63. Now this is another book I read earlier this year, and I've spoken about it on my channel. And just a quick reminder, it is an awesome tale, time travel. It's a love story, and it is very, very exciting, where this teacher, Jake Epping, goes back in time to the 50s with the ultimate goal to prevent the assassination of JFK in the 60s. While he's there, you know, he just takes to the simple life. No cell phones, no iPhones, no nothing. And he falls in love, he joins the school, and he has some adventures along the way. Sometimes it is pretty dark. There's a couple of scenes that are kind of horrific, but it's more of the human horror than anything else. But I would just highly recommend this. This is just a beautiful, beautifully written story. And yeah, pick it up if you get a chance. In 5th position we have a novel I read a long, long time ago, and that is Salem's Lot. but it really touched me and it really scared me. And this is about a writer, Ben Mears, who goes back to his small town where he spent part of his childhood growing up, and he's going back to face some demons, as well as to write about this house, this Marston house up on the hill, this spooky house. And basically things start happening in this town. These kids disappear, and he is almost a target because he is an outsider. But he falls in love with this woman, there's a love interest, develops this relationship with a priest and this young boy. And look, the first half of the novel is slow. He really builds these characters. You really get to know these characters. And you don't really see much of, and I'm not giving any spoilers away, obviously they're vampires in this book. But you don't see much of that until the second half of the novel, where things really take off. But there's a slow burn, there's a build-up of tension, there are plenty of scares along the way, but when things take off, man, do they take off. There are some truly horrifying moments in this novel. There's one particular scene I remember reading, I'm not going to give away a spoiler, it's concerned a boy at a window, that I couldn't sleep that night. There's some really good stuff going on in this novel. If you love horror, you need to read Salem's Lot. Okay everyone, in fourth position, and this could very possibly be higher on a reread, because this scared the crap out of me, and that is The Shining. Now, I love the movie and the book, but it's important to note that the book is not the movie. And I think the reason it might be lower on my list is because it's not fresh in my mind, like the movie, and I have to remind myself exactly the differences. And I think one of the main things is that Jack Torrance, okay, just a brief outline of the story, goes to Overlook Hotel with his family, his wife, and his young child, Danny, who has the Shining disability. And basically they go to the Overlook Hotel because he's going to be the caretaker for the winter, for the off-season of the hotel, while he's going to write. He's going to write, he's got a lot of potential as a writer. Now in the movie he goes to the hotel and you can already see that he's unhinged. He's not right in the head. In the book this is different. He's made mistakes, but he's a caring husband, and he wants to rectify those mistakes. He's got a lot of potential as a writer, so he starts off sane, not crazy like Jack Nicholson. And that's a huge difference in the book. Another difference is that in the movie, the supernatural element seems to be suggested that a lot of it is more in his head. In the book, the supernatural horror is real. That horror is out to get Jack. It's not in his head. That is very real in the book. It is terrifying, and Danny's Shining only enhances that. I'm not going to tell you the ending. Maybe you haven't seen the movie or read the book, but this is an awesome novel. And it's claustrophobic, the setting where the Overlook Hotel is basically snowed in. There's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to hide, and it's just awesome. The characters, Danny, the focus is mostly on Jack and what happens to him in this hotel, which is pretty tragic. But this is just a terrifying novel, and actually recommend it for anyone who's new to Stephen King. If you want to be really scared and you like horror and you haven't read any Stephen King, read The Shining. Okay, remember when I said that I was only going to have one Dark Tower entry on this list? I have gone with The Wastelands at number 3. Now, I absolutely adore this series, and I intend to do a video basically ranking all 7 books, actually 8 books, in order, and doing a full discussion on those books. And in this particular video, I don't want to give away spoilers by talking too much about the 3rd entry. So obviously I just want to keep this brief, but it is awesome. And let's just say this is fantasy stroke horror stroke almost a western post-apocalyptic crazy trip And in this particular book, I'm just going to say that the characters, you learn more about them. And you learn more about what this tower is. I'm not going to say anything more. You learn more about the purpose of their journey, because it is a journey. And you also get the characters drawing closer together and their stories told and so on. They are traveling in this particular book. For the first time, they are actually moving properly. It's almost like the story gets going, whereas in the first two books you're introduced to characters, you're introduced to certain things. In this book, the actual journey, the quest gets going, which is awesome. The setting, post-apocalyptic, dystopian, absolutely messed up setting. I really love that. And some of the crazy stuff that happens along the way in this book, horrific, hilarious, the city, blood, oh my word. And yeah, it is crazy in a way that a lot of the first two books are not crazy, and I loved it. It was just so wild, and I think that's why it's in my first position. A lot of the other books are very close, and they would have been on this list, but as I say, I'm just putting one in for the sake of that. Wastelands. Okay, before I go into second place, I have to say that these last two books are very close. They both absolutely blew me away. And the fact that they are both Stephen King's longest books, coming in at over 1,000 pages, perhaps is not a coincidence, because remember right at the beginning of this video, I talked about character building and world building. And these last two novels are a perfect example of that. In second position we have It, about a crazy clown, a killer clown, and these children in a small town of Derry. They call themselves the Losers Club. There's these 7 kids that basically have to face this clown, this evil, as well as contend with growing up, with bullies, and with all sorts of hardships along the way. And these kids are awesome. And this is something I haven't said yet in this video, but King writes about kids and childhood better than any other author, period. He knows about kids, and he knows about adolescence and growing up. And yeah, maybe some things happen in this book, I don't even remember. But this is a magnificent, incredible story. And unlike some people, as I said, it's very, very, very long. There's a lot of character building, there's a lot of world building. I did not feel that a word is wasted. And I also really enjoyed the ending, where some people, I think, found the ending a bit too much. I thought it just blew my mind. And I remember this is the first book I ever read by Stephen King. I think I was 14 or something. And I just sat there under the covers with the lights on. I think I had a torch because I was supposed to go to bed, and I just carried on reading. I could not put this book down. It is that good. That is Stephen King, It. Okay everyone, and in first position, and this is no surprise for anyone, I'm sure if you've been watching my channel, you have The Stand. And this is my first time, the complete and uncut edition, which I've read a number of times. This is a masterpiece. This is his masterpiece, and I think it's just about as close to a perfect novel as you can get, in my opinion. The character building, the world building, this post-apocalyptic setting, the good versus evil is just unbelievable. And you just fall in love with these characters. You know, Stu. There are just too many to name. Even the dog, Kojak. Every single character in this novel is just gold. And they're all flawed in some way. Pretty much they all have weaknesses. And even the evil characters, they're flawed, but they kind of, I'm thinking of Harold Lauter, that's one character. He's not necessarily a terrible kid at the beginning, but he kind of becomes one. And that is because of the Dark Man, Roland Flagg. And this novel has everything for me. It has magic and adventure, it has horror, and really if you actually want to find out more about it, please watch my video, Top 10 Horror Novels of All Time. I think I spoke about this a bit longer, but really I would highly recommend The Stand. And don't be intimidated by the length. It really is, I don't see filler. Every word counts for me, and I just live this book. That is The Stand. Okay everyone, that's my top 10 Stephen King novels. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. But also remember that this is my personal opinion. Every list would be different. If I have not chosen your favourite, just let me know in the comments below. But all these lists are subjective. Everyone will have different entries because Stephen King has something for everyone. So yeah, like and subscribe. Please take care of yourselves and keep those pages turning. Cheers.